You are listening to the Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the Overwatch League news and information. The show with Tactical Visor on the statistics and analysis. Here are your hosts, Totally Drunk, Spider, and Slambo.
What is up, guys, and welcome back to Overwatch League Network, the podcast with Deadeye on all the latest Overwatch League news, information, and esports analysis. I am your host, Totally Drunk, and tonight on episode 93, we'll be discussing the latest news that hit the Overwatch League, share our thoughts on what had transpired in Stage 4, Week 4, and look ahead to the Kit Kat rivalry week of Stage 4, Week 5 as we lock in playoff seeded and play-in teams. But before we can jump into the news and introduce you to my co-hosts, let me just take a quick moment to thank everyone who is joining us tonight on Twitch for our live show, and of course thank all of our repeat listeners out there. So joining me tonight, as always, is my co-host Spider, and Spider, we basically went from what was a marathon week into a marathon game, as, you know, we had a little bit of shenanery going down on the tech side yesterday.
Oh, holy cow. That was an event. That was, I don't even know how to describe that. That was an experience. Like, you had to be there to fully appreciate what that is. Like, even if you go back and sit through the whole VOD, it's just not quite the same. But I did enjoy that I could go back and watch the game today and skip over that part because there were parts earlier in the match that I missed. So I was glad for that. But yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it a little later. So I'll give more thoughts on that. But it was a good week. I mean, I would say this was probably the most calm week we've had since 2-2-2. Like, basically most of the matches went pretty much the way we expected them to. You know, not any. I would say there are a couple upsets, but not any, like, you know, Washington beating Vancouver level of upsets. So it's calming down now. We're getting a much better picture of how playoffs are going to work, and you know, I have to appreciate that. And you know, we'll break it all down. But how about you? How did you enjoy the second to last week of Overwatch League 2019?
Well, I've been kind of under the weather today and yesterday, so yesterday was kind of a longer day to sit through, especially during the tech mishaps. But it was a pretty good week. I will say the highlight was definitely the Reign Justice game. That definitely lived up to our expectations. That was a razor-thin game. Dynasty kind of split the week, so I was hoping that, you know, maybe they'd be able to make their way in the top 6, but that's not going to happen. But, you know, they've kind of got their lineup resituated, playing Fleta again, but we haven't seen any deadlifts as of yet. But all in all, it's been a pretty exciting week, and we're getting so close to knowing who all is going to be in the top 12. Is really, at this point, there's only two teams vying to get that final slot between the Chengdu Hunters and the Los Angeles Valiant. So, you know, that battle for LA has pretty high playoff implications moving forward. So I'm really anxious to see how the Valiant are going to do in that series. And on top of that, like, I know we're going to have a ton of announcements in regards to home venues tomorrow for the Overwatch League for 2020. Maybe we'll even get, like, the full schedule tomorrow as well, so we'll definitely be diving into that when all of that information is out for our next episode. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into the news. So for starters, I know last week there was a little bit of a leak that happened. I know we talked about it on Heroes Never Die. We didn't touch up on it on this particular podcast because it wasn't out at the time. But there were some tweets sent out very recently by the London Spitfire, and it was a picture of the team, and they were outside of Blizzard headquarters. So, of course, there was a lot of rumors circulating about, you know, why they were at Blizzard HQ, and it turns out this is basically because they were going in to take care of their commemorative championship skin that was going to be added to the game. And we actually got a leak that turned out to be legit, and the skin that the Spitfire got are a Winston skin, which is pilot-themed. This one is called the Flying Ace, And Winston is basically, he's sitting there wearing an orange and baby blue pilot's outfit. Of course, it's complete with an aviator hat. He also has his fly-in brown leather gloves, and his jacket has the sigil for the London Spitfire, so it has the logo on there. And if that wasn't enough, he also has like the classic British mustache, the swirly one. He even has some Spitfire-inspired jets on his back to really bring it all home. And I have to say, this one looks pretty damn good. And this is going to be an instant purchase for me. And for those wondering, this skin is going to be 200 League tokens, just like the MVP one, and that will be made purchasable on August 29th, lasting until September 16th. So you guys got a couple of weeks of window to go out and purchase the skin.
Yeah, I mean, this is cool. Another unexpected skin resulting from last year's success, I guess. I did kind of like that this one the Spitfire had no input on, unlike the Jonak skin where Jonak kind of had input on how it was designed and aspects of it. This was a surprise for the Spitfire, and the reveal video does a really good job of showing their genuine reactions to it. So I thought that was really cool. As far as the skin, not my favorite. I definitely still like the Gargoyle Winston skin a little better, but I do appreciate the custom animations, the plane on the back, the propeller moves, and stuff like that. As a whole, the gun looks amazing. The gun actually looks like a mini wrecking ball gun because it's got almost the actual turret guns on it. So that looks really cool. I'll pick it up. I mean, with the new Twitch picks and then just watching Overwatch League, I have enough to saved up to buy it, so I'll definitely pick it up, and I'll use it from time to time. But I think Gargoyle's still going to be my default Winston skin. But they're setting a precedent this year, so this just makes me more excited to see who wins because I'm like, oh cool, then we can theory craft what skin they're going to get and stuff like that. So it's just another fun talking point, and I appreciate that.
And if it's a Dragons one, it will basically just have clipped wings, which we'll get into later. But anyways, we do have an update on the Washington Justice. Outside of them attempting to go 7-0, that was dashed. It actually made a move in regards to their front office, and they went out and they picked up a new general manager. So they have turned to former LA Gladiators community directory and current Team USA general manager Annalyn Dane, and she'll be filling in as a new GM starting in 2020. Now, Annalyn's sign-in basically comes after the retirement of former GM Kate Mitchell, and of course this was back in May. And ever since then, they've basically been operating without a general manager up until this point. Now, with the Gladiators, I know Annalyn was primarily known for kind of being the brains behind their social media account. The Gladiators Twitter game, pretty on point. Definitely one of the more marketable social medias out there, and that basically helped secure the spot as the community lead for the U.S. World Cup team this past year. And I know Annalyn is also involved with the U.S. team for this current season. But it's kind of interesting. I don't think the announcement was that weird, primarily just because the season's already over. But at least fans can know going forward, okay, we have a clear direction where we want to take the team in 2020, but a lot more of the questions about the Justice are going to be revolving around what sort of movements we're going to be seeing on the team itself, primarily because they've had this really polarizing stage when you compare it to the rest of the field this season, because honestly, I know going into this stage, a lot of people were pretty down on Sansom, and after seeing his Roadhog performances here as of late, having a lot of games securing 80+% hook accuracy, the tune has basically changed almost from top to bottom for these Washington Justice. So I'm really anxious to see how much movement they're actually going to have, knowing how drastic of a change it has been, at least on their roster.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the point of this is they're getting the low hanging fruit out of the way. They need a GM, so they're taking care of that now to kind of shore up going into the off season, because there's going to be bigger announcements like venue, player trades, stuff like that. So I think they just wanted to reassure the fan base, because Washington did have such a rough season up until stage 4. So I think they just want to put some confidence back into the team, and I think she's a good person to do it. She's been knocking it out of the park for Team USA. She was killing it on the Gladiators in terms of social media and stuff like that. So I think as long as that presence transfers to knowledge, because we don't know how she'll do in a GM role, because the GM role is very different than a social media coordinator. But from what she's talked about, from stuff I've seen, interviews I've seen, just her general social media presence, it seems like she gets it. Like she knows the game, she knows the players, she knows obviously how the league operates. So I think it's a good person to put in the GM, and then you can fall back on your coaches. Whether Wizards there next year or not, that's yet to be seen. But I think this is a good look for Justice, and like I said, it just clears the way for bigger, better announcements going into the off season.
This was not the only sign-in that we heard about this past week, because we did get a sign-in out of Vancouver Titans, which had long been rumored for several weeks now, after I know his jersey kind of suddenly appeared on the Fnatic store, that being Tizzy. So Tizzy is set to join the team pending visa approval, so he's going to be reunited with his former Runaway squad, where he had played alongside players like Bumper, Hoxel, Janu, and Stitch. Now, he ended up splitting with Runaway back in 2018 when he was offered a spot for the London Spitfire, but unfortunately for Tizzy, he never actually got to take the stage for London before he was released this past June. And of course, since then, I know he's been bouncing around kind of like on the contender scene. He had 10 years with XL2 Academy, who just won one of the Contenders NA titles. He was also on Guangzhou Academy, which kind of crapped the bed early on. And most recently, he was with Grunto Esports, and I know they've been kind of going through their own thing and rebrand, all of that good stuff. But, this is a curious scene. So, obviously, the playoffs are right around the corner. Bumper's been getting probably more flack than he has the remainder of the season, just in the current meta, I would say. His cooldown usage has been pretty iffy at best, especially on the Orisa. So who knows what this can be? Maybe we can see a future where Tizzy's gonna come in, play a couple of maps in the playoffs, or maybe they'll stick to their guns at this point. But having an option is always better, as opposed to just kind of hitting your head against the wall on a role that has been very important with setting up plays with the pull.
Yeah, I mean, literally in my notes, I have written "act surprised" because like we've known about this trade for, I don't know, it feels like half the season at this point. Like it seems so weird for them to announce it when they're basically done with the regular season. So, I mean, it is a good pickup. I think they do need more options in the main tank role because, like you said, Bumper has shown some weakness, which was weird to say at this point. But I don't know if they would change it going into the playoffs, because that's a very dangerous time to sub out your main tank. I mean, we saw what happened to the Gladiators last year when they had main tank drama. So
unless Tizzy's coming in to play Sigma.
Exactly. So there could be, like, maybe there's a specific map that they will train him on, and that will be like they'll go through the stage 4, and they'll say, all right, this is the map Bumper statistically did the worst on every time. Mm-hmm. So if we draw that map, we will put Tizzy in so he can play whatever. And Vancouver's a very smart team with a very deep analytic coaching staff, so they could easily pull something like that off. So I think I've always been a big proponent of you should kind of have a backup in almost every spot. Like, you should have a backup tank, specifically main tank, because we've seen a lot of teams flex to off tank, like they'll pull DPS players in and crap like that. So I think this is just a good idea. Like, there's nothing surprising about this. There's nothing groundbreaking about this. He's a good player. I was upset that he never got a chance to show that in season 1, and then he got relegated back to contenders, and he did really well there because he's a really good player. So he's just back with the boys now. So good for him.
Because I know even when Tizzy had played for Grunto Esports, he basically got picked up after, I think, the first 2 games that he played. with them when he got signed to Vancouver, and then we had that waiting period for the announcement to be made. So I don't know. The timing of it does seem kind of weird because the signing window closed several weeks ago at this point, before the start of the stage, and here we are going into the final week of the stage, and now we have another player announcement. So I know a little, like, some people have been a little bit bitter about that, like, well, why not just announce it earlier? Well, they were probably just waiting on visa approval before making anything official at that point. And I'm pretty sure Fanatics, after that leak happened, pulled the merchandise from the store anyway. But it's not like we didn't know that it was going to happen. Because I'm pretty sure, like, even one of the Grunto staff members had tweeted that he was going to the Titans as well. So everything just comes full circle, guys. So outside of that, obviously we alluded to this earlier on in the show, and that is that, Dallas and Guangzhou had what was a marathon of a match, not for the reasons that you expect. No, it was not because it was like a 5-map thriller. This was actually a pretty one-sided series across the board, but it was the 4th map in particular in this series on Havana that completely shat the bed, technically, because Unco had, a couple of mouse issues, and then they were having issues getting the match restarted. The game was, like, crashing and erroring out. And this lasted for over 45 minutes of pause time. And, when the tough gets going, like, it's so funny seeing, one, how good the casters are at overtalk. How good are you at selling time? And then it even got to the point when they started to air the Watch Point post-show before the game had even finished up. And the worst part about this is, like, we were so close to actually finishing this series. The Fuel had less than a minute left on their attack, which really was not showing that much, because they were looking to lose that one as well. But it got to the point where I know when all was said and done, I know Mickey was, like, politely trolling his teammate Harry Hook for having more stage time on stage than him, which was great to see, just due to the amount of tech issues that they had here. But I have to say, I feel like the producers handled this pretty well. This is not something that happens every day, but it seems like for Dallas, they just can't catch a break. So first, they have the blackout during their homestand event, and then Unco has this happen, and it's just like, enough is enough, guys. Like, that series was already done with. But,
even the computers don't want Dallas to play anymore. That's how bad it's getting as a Dallas Fuel fan. But Arrow actually went on Twitter and clarified what really happened. So it wasn't exactly a mouse issue. He went on and said that it was actually like his character just wasn't moving. It wasn't responding. So it initially they thought it was a mouse issue, but it seemed like it was something deeper. Like, it seems like it was a bug. And then, they switched mice and they did a few things, and it actually ran time, and I guess they pressed Q at some point because they said he lost an ultimate. So they went in with the Overwatch League tool to kind of reset everything. And when they did that, I guess there was a bug in that, which caused the charge to not be able to leave spawn. Which, if you're a Fuel fan, that sounds great, because that would have been the only way we would have won. That map. But so they had to fix that. And of course, they ended up having to reboot the whole game, like restart from scratch. They set the time up because they have the tool that can do that, and then it finally worked. But through all this trial and error and process, it took 50 minutes. And like you said, the production did really well. Like Wolf and Achilleos are no strangers to having to stall, because there was multiple times that they had to stall for 15, 20, even like 30 minutes on various casts. So they did really good, and production helped them out. Like, they ran some of the videos from Watchpoint. Even at one point, they decided to start the Watchpoint post show, which I thought was hilarious, because they're like, well, come on, it's map 4. The charge has already won. What does this really matter? And then, they did actually get to restart the map. And it's kind of a bad look when a team gets to restart their attack. Like, they get to redo basically 4 minutes worth of progress. But for the timing, this is probably the best time for that to happen because Charge has already won. So at this point, they're just playing for map differential, and they had won in such a convincing fashion. They were like, whatever, we could stop them again. And to Dallas's credit, they buckled up and tried to make a better show of it the second time, and they did. So it was exciting. But I just kind of want to reiterate, like, if something like this is going to happen, that was probably the best time for it to happen. You definitely don't want that to happen when it's like a 2-2 game 5, last point on, Nepal or whatever, and the winner is going on to the playoffs. Like, that would have been absolute travesty. Like, there would be much more talk about that than this. Like, this was just kind of like a fun, oh man, that sucks. Like, shucks, oof, the general memes. So, but I will say that I was happy to get to see Mickey that whole time. And if you're gonna be stuck in that situation, Mickey's the one you want on stage to be stuck in that situation because he's going to keep your team, not necessarily focused, but less tilty. So it was an experience. So I'm not at all upset that it happened, but I don't ever want to see it ever happen again.
Yeah, it's important to note too, like, not all of the seed-in for the playoffs is determined at this point, so there's a reason why they still had to go through with the match. Now, that being said, you obviously this isn't always the best look, but you want something like this to happen. That way, if it ever happens again, you know how to better handle the situation. So next time, they'll probably immediately make the decision to just jump in and restart that side of the map, as opposed to going through the tools and trying to restart the match that way, since that obviously continued to cause game errors at that point. But yeah, Mickey was definitely pretty level-headed, and I love that he got to troll his teammates for getting the stage time there after not playing all season outside of that Doomfist 1v1 against OGE at that point. But Dallas, unfortunately, they're eliminated from playoffs. They finished, they're 10-16. But there's still 2 spots up for grabs, and the Charge right now with that win sit in 10th place. But their map differential right now is 0, so we'll see where they rise or fall after this upcoming week. Now, with that being said, of course, there was a lot of stuff that did happen this past week, so let's go ahead and jump into our post-game discussion. So, first off, let's talk about the Atlanta Reign. The Atlanta Reign have been kind of pushing themselves towards the forefront. They've definitely looked like one of the elite teams in the 2-2-2 lock. And they went up against another team that was looking pretty stable to finish in the top 6. But now there is kind of a question mark about where London is going to finish when all is said and done. So Reign, they come in and they just completely dominate London Spitfire, completing the sweep, and the Reign are closing in on the potential to reach the top 6 to completely avoid the play-in tournament. Now, here's the thing with London. What is more London than by finishing a series by a classic C9? I mean, the script writes itself at this point with London. I will say it's been a lot of inconsistencies with this team. I know Badosian has been pretty late with the Transcendence usage, and London seemed to have an issue with not having a great mate player on that lineup, and in the current meta that we're in with the Dicicle, that's definitely hindered them as a team. Now, we've seen other teams that have also been fallen from grace that have kind of been fallen prey to this as well. Shanghai is a good example of that. They try to kind of like stick with their own game plan in this meta, but their picks are easily countered, and we've seen how far they have fallen at this point. But it seems like a lot of the talk about London, kind of like going into this, like everyone thought like this would be a much better team in 2-2-2, and that just hasn't happened. And Reign held London to 0 map objectives through the first 3 maps of this series, but Spitfire did end up securing 2 objectives on Havana. But with that loss, London right now do have a chance to get relegated to the play-in tournament while Atlanta continues to look like a top contender at this point.
Yeah, it just looked like London wasn't really ready for Atlanta's aggressive style. I mean, like, there were multiple points where the rain pushed London back to their spawn on certain maps. So it was really good to see if you're an Atlanta fan, and it was really concerning if you were a London fan. The switch off between Baby Bay coming in and out, it actually looks really good. Like they seem like they have him tailored to a few specific maps, and he looks really I don't want to say comfortable because I don't think that does it justice, but he looks really at home on the Reaper, like just teleporting in and then just going ham. But I mean, obviously the tour de force that is Erster still remains in effect. Like he just, I don't know how he ends up in the middle of groups, but then that group just dies. Like it's very interesting to watch him do that stuff. But the one I really focused on in this match was FRD, because previously when FRD had come in before stage 4, he had looked really shaky. Like, obviously it was Dako, like you can't replace Dako. But at this point, like, FRD has basically cemented himself on both the Roadhog and the Diva, that it's almost like Dako who. I mean, it really doesn't matter. So I was really impressed with his Roadhog. Like, Pokpo seems to be a very decent, I don't want to say excellent Orisa, because he's not doing anything that no other Orisa's doing, other than he times his cooldowns a little better than some of the other ones and stuff like that. So he at least knows how to cycle his cooldowns a little better. We saw multiple points where he would just stand in the blizzard because he knew it was coming and hold the objective, which is what you want to see out of your main tank. But FRD was the one that I saw the most growth with, from when we first saw him, many stages ago to now. He's definitely earned that position. But Spitfire, on the other hand, Spitfire worry me, because we've talked about their problems for the last couple of weeks. But it just seems like, Gesture doesn't seem really comfortable on the Orisa. Birdring still is inconsistent. And on top of that, like, kind of what used to cover that up is Prophet. Like, Prophet used to pop off, but we're not seeing that anymore for the reasons you mentioned. He's just not looking good on the May. He's just not living up to those expectations that he set for himself, last season and earlier this season. Like, even when he was on Brig and Brig Jail, he was still popping off. He was still making a difference. Whereas now, it's almost like he's just there, which you don't want. The MVP from last year's grand finals to just be there, especially when your other DPS isn't doing what they need to do half the time anyway. So Spitfire have very little time to fix the problems. And if they get relegated to the play-ins, I honestly don't know if we'll see them in the actual playoffs, because they look very shaky. And we'll talk about the situation that they're in and who's going where when we go over the week 5 preview. But I do want to end on a high note, because I don't want to just shit on Spitfire this whole time. Their support line still looks really good, so I think their problems are fixable and they are coachable problems. So I do think that Spitfire fans shouldn't be all doom and gloom. But Atlanta also might go 7-0, so that's a possibility too. But yeah, this was a tough one to watch if you're any kind of Spitfire fan.
Yeah, Atlanta going 7-0 seems pretty likely. Just like FRD being the leader of the bad shoes meta, which was also pointed out in our Twitch chat. Absolutely. And I have to say, like, God help us if London Spitfire get relegated and end up having to face Philadelphia Fusion, because I couldn't think of two more inconsistent teams to save my life than those two, because they really feel like they parallel one another at this point. And I feel like part of that is because, yes, Prophet hasn't been popping up, but it's primarily been like he's good at the heroes that, well, he's good at the snipers that are in the meta, but unfortunately we're not always seeing the snipers, and then he ends up falling prey to doing the May Reaper comps, and then he just falls short of the field in that situation. But man, it feels bad. I don't want to see a situation when we see Fusion going up against the Spitfire because I don't know who would clutch it less in that specific scenario.
Yeah, that would be exactly what that match comes down to. Who can clutch the worst? That is the team that is not going to make it. As much as I just kind of crapped on the Spitfire, I still think they're better than the Fusion because the Fusion just seem very lifeless. Like it's a few weeks ago we talked about the comments of like Monty saying that they don't even want to be there, and I kind of defended them like they're just kind of in a rut with goats and stuff like that. I don't know now. Like at this point, I honestly feel like half of them just don't want to be there. Just from how you see them, how they act, how they look on stage. So I would still give it to the Spitfire. But yeah, that's indicative of how this season goes. That last year's grand finals could be in a play-in to even make it in the tournament. So that's interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the best comparison I can make for these teams is like, let's say you're playing darts and you're blindfolded and you're just doing a no-look throw, and that determines whether or not if they're going to have an okay performance or just a very mediocre one. Because the pop-up moments just haven't been there. It's like they either are going to get like a 3-1 win or they're going to get swept. And you never know which one it is going to be. It's really a coin toss at that point.
There's an old saying, and it goes, when you throw shit against the wall, you may hit the target, but it still looks like shit. And that's basically what that game would be.
Fair enough. But anyways, we were talking about the perfect stage, and for one team, that hope has been dashed thanks to the Atlanta Reign. So Washington Justice, unfortunately, are not going to finish their 7-0 stage. But you know what? They had everyone coming out donning their shades, which was nice to see. You got their sunglasses meta in time for their final appearance. And the Justice, all in all, this stage have been looking pretty good. And when they faced Atlanta, these were two teams that were coming into this match who were both right in highs. And it was Atlanta that ended up securing the win here. And I have to say, this is probably one of the closest games that we have seen all season. Several players really had some pop-off moments. Sansom on the Roadhog definitely put up some monster percentages. I know Corey had a lot of pop-off moments. Ursa was looking pretty good throughout the series. Really, this was one of those games that you can walk away from and be very confident with how your team played. There's really not too much bad that you could say on either side. I will say, Atlanta in this series did opt against playing into the hand of, the sniper duel. They were not trying to counter Corey, and instead of doing that, they were basically running compositions to try to force Corey to switch off the snipers. But it was really Junkertown when things kind of just unraveled for Washington, especially on that third point. I know at one point, Dogman had gotten behind the Justice, and they ended up peeling two people back in order to take care of Dogman, and then they ended up losing a frontline battle, and then that ended up securing the win for Atlanta on that particular map. But all in all, this match definitely lived up to our expectations, and while it might not have been the biggest game playoff-wise, it at least put Atlanta into a situation where they could prove that they were the best team in the stage, even against a hot hand of the Justice.
No, this game was, don't let the 2-1 scoreline fool you. This was better than a lot of games that went to Mat 5. It just seems like both teams kind of got what the other team was going to do, and they kind of knew at least how to approach it. Neither of the teams looked lost when the opposite team would do something. Like you said, they opted out of the sniper duel, so Corey would have to make swaps, and he couldn't really, sit back on Widowmaker or Hanzo or something like that. But to Justice's credit, they took up that fight well, and they made a match out of it. And like you said, Junkertown was really weird. Junkertown, the Justice looked really bad the first 2 points. They had some decent moments, but it wasn't until point 3 that they kind of got their footing again, defending, and they basically stalled them till overtime, and it was inches that the Justice almost stopped the cart there, but then Atlanta's clutch factor just came in, and we saw Dogman popping off. We saw random changes to like Doomfist, and we saw Baby Bay come in, and they had some fun on point three, and that was definitely one of the craziest like overtime pushes I've seen. And we've seen multiple really good overtime pushes this year. And then Justice came back, and then they had to attack, and they struggled the whole time, but they kind of grinded it out, and they made it to the end. But they were also in the same situation, like they had to basically push all of point three in overtime, and they just couldn't complete it like Atlanta did. I will say that Yanis or Janice or however you want to say it, because it seems like every caster says it differently, still is an issue. Like, the stage 4 band-aid is in full effect, but there are multiple times that he was caught out. He was positioned badly. So he's still a problem. But like you said, Sam is definitely on the rise. Corey, obviously, Corey's probably safe. The Corey Erster battle definitely lived up to the hype. We got to see who could pop off harder on certain maps, and it was really good. The high point for me, though, was Ashe, because we got to see Baby Bay actually play Ashe, and he looked really good with her. So I think this might, with the reload change coming in, we might actually see more Ashe in these type of situations. Like, I still definitely think she's going to be, very point specific, but using her on a Hanamura B is a great place to use her, because she can do full damage to the full point. She can get into the random areas. And Bob is a great stalling tool in that point, because there is nothing that can, block your line of sight once you're on the point. Like, you have to pillar dance, and you have to get off the point to do that. So Bob is actually really strong on that point. So I was really excited to see a lot of Ashe. Well, not a lot of Ashe, but just Ashe actually used as like a non-trolly pick. But yeah, this was a hell of a match. So if you go watch any match from last week, this is definitely one of the best matches to watch.
100%. So outside of that, we have to touch up on one of the playoff teams who have definitely had a rough go of a transition, especially since the 2-2-2 lock came in, and that was the team that finished as the Stage 3 champions this prior stage, of course that being the Shanghai Dragons. So the Dragons, up until this point, have only secured one win this stage. This is a far cry from the stage that they had in Stage 3. And we've seen them lose to both the Seoul Dynasty and Paris Eternal this past week. Both were 3-1 losses to those teams. With their other losses, this stage coming to the Shock, Toronto Defiant, and the Vancouver Titans. So right now the Dragons are not looking too hot. They are currently 13-14 overall. Their map differential is -6. And there's a shot that they can fall to 12th place in the stand-ins depending on what happens this week. So right now they're currently sitting in 11th place. So they are just ahead of the Hunters, who have one more loss, and then the Valiant are the other team that are in contention there. And a lot of this really boils down to the fact that, for one, the Dragons just, they hit their stride running triple DPS. And they just have not been able to find the same success in Rollock so far. Dean has primarily been sticking to the Pharah. We've seen Yunjin primarily playing the Doomfist. And I would say those are looking okay. Like, they haven't necessarily been great. But they've just not had the same carry potential like they could before. And a lot of that just boils down to you're not having to deal with as many sightlines if you're the opposition in this case. Because before they also had, like, the Widowmaker on top of that. So it was that additional threat that now they're not having to deal with, so they can hone in on other assets of this team. And I will say, like, we've seen Fair Widow from this team every now and then, bringing in DM who hasn't been filling in all the time. And while I feel like that particular composition can work in specific maps, the comps that Shanghai have been running has some pretty glaring weaknesses, and teams have been able to exploit that. And when you factor in how they're doing against, like, the rest of the field right now, they do not have the Mei figured out in this current meta, and they're going to need to find an answer quick, because if they don't, this is another one of those teams, just like, London, just like Philadelphia, who are very susceptible to get knocked out right away, regardless of what aspect of the playoffs they're in, whether it's a play-in tournament or otherwise.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. Like their big problem stems from their just lack of flexibility on DPS. Like Ding pretty much only plays the Pharah, which we don't really see any other team run the Pharah as much as the Dragons. Now we didn't under 3-3 and stuff like that, except for maybe the Hunters. Like the Hunters might come close, but even now the Hunters have started opting for more stuff. So Ding is definitely by far the last remaining Pharah standing, and it's so one-dimensional. And since you're so locked into the 2-2-2 and you can't dictate those sight lines, they're really depending on the other DPS. And like you said, Diem and Youngjin just aren't really creating the opportunities for the Pharah. And with that just, like I said, it's so one-dimensional that teams are just like, oh, cool, there's a Pharah up there. Let's just run on the ground. Oh, cool, they're running Diem, so they're probably going to play a sniper. So we're just going to play, Mei Reaper and block the sniper sight lines and then run over the team. And then it's, a sniper and a Pharah. Like, what are they going to do? So it's just, I don't know. And, Gamsu has looked okay on the Orisa, but he definitely doesn't look comfortable. Like we often see him flex to Hammond. He seems much more comfortable on Hammond, and that we have seen other teams run this. Hunters still primarily run it, but it doesn't gel with that Pharah style. Like it's just without that third DPS, it really limits their engage options. And when another team is running Mei Reaper, you need a strong engage to take advantage in a fight, and they just can't do that. And it doesn't help that it seems like the DPS as a whole, like all three of them, just aren't really playing to what we saw in stage 3. And that could just be victims of the 2-2-2, and other teams are playing a lot stronger now. They're less bound by goats, so they're not as free reign. But it is sad to see that the Dragons fall this hard, because we're honestly looking at a team that we thought could make a run into the playoffs, and they may not. But compared to last season, they're still doing pretty good, I guess. So basically, what it comes down to me is Youngjin needs to step it up. Like I think Diem's okay. Like he still looks passable. I think he will be a viable option on certain maps, but Youngjin needs to create that space if they still want to run the Pharah. And as much as I love Youngjin's Doomfist, it's just not working, buddy. So you gotta figure out Reaper, or you gotta figure out Mei real quick.
Well, it's interesting to see like where we rank this team after their playoff run. At the start of the stage, because I know for the most part, I'm pretty sure we had them top 3 across the board. And looking at where we have them right now, it's kind of like all over the place. I know, looking at the most current ones, which aren't released yet, like we have them like 16th, 11th, and 12th. So we have them near that very bottom of the play-in tournament. But it's just one of those things. Like, I can understand if you were sitting pretty and you wanted to see how far you could push things by not running the perceived meta. And this team has kind of been doing their own thing, and it has not been working out. And right now, like, this is the dire straits moment. They need to figure out their course of action. What are they going to do come play-in time? And right now, based off of what we have seen, we haven't really seen anything to really put a lot of stock value in this team for the play-in tournament. And you don't want to be going into this with one of the low seeds, especially when you factor in like some of these other teams that are in the play-in tournament that have been hitting their strides, like Atlanta, like the Charge. Even the Dynasty have been looking better. So you're basically like hoping that you're going to be coming across against a team that is less streaky, or more streaky, depending on how you want to. It goes both ways. But you want to face one of these teams that is more inconsistent And right now, more than half of the field that could be making it into the playing tournament does not meet those requirements. So I don't know how comfortable you can be right now if you're the Dragon. So maybe this will be a team that throws out the Sigma and tries to rely on that to try to, throw some people off. But right now, based on what we've seen, they need to come up with a fix, and we need to see it now.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be curious to watch them go into the playoffs and see how they adapt, because they do. Let me see. They do play against the Spark this week, so the Spark have looked really good. So I think that'll be a good gauge on how they're looking going into the playoffs. Which, can we take a moment to appreciate how much better the Spark looked this week? It was like a different team got on stage. Like it was crazy. Go back and watch like one of last week's games for the Spark, and then watch one of their games, preferably not the Dallas game, but watch their other game this week, and like they were a completely different team. Like their May was looking good. Like Godspeed has been. I don't know. Like it's just crazy to see that level of change in 1 week. Like we've seen teams progressively get better over the stage, but nothing quite like that drastic. So I was really happy to see the Spark turn it around, because last week we were like really doom and gloom on the Spark. We were like, oh man, they could fall out of the playoffs. Like they could take a hard fall, and then they just turned it around this week and like, no, we're good again. JK, so. I have to give a shout out to them, because I was really impressed with how they played this week. And one of the games was against Dallas, and to Dallas's credit, they didn't completely crap the bed that game. They had moments where you're like, hey, they're doing something. But as a whole, not a great gauge, but I was still happy to see the Spark do better. But yeah, their Gladiators game, I was like, whoa. That is not the same team that I've been watching this whole time in Stage 4.
Yeah, and they were definitely on the verge of getting relegated to the playing tournament too, and now they've locked into the top 6, which is nice to see. Currently sitting in 4th place right now, but we'll see what that Battle of LA is going to lead to, and we'll see where we go from there at that point. But yeah, the Spark are definitely looking a lot better. It's crazy, like, really the only other team that kind of had like a sudden resurgence as of late was maybe Florida? Like, it's a weird team to bring up, but like maybe have been like another team who just kind of, like, I know they haven't had the most impressive stage, but like when you compare it to the field for the rest of the season, they had a stark turnaround this stage, and they've started to look a lot better, and Gargoyle is a huge part of that. And it's crazy to think, like, how many of these teams suddenly look drastically different just with the resurgence of Roadhog in the meta, and Gargoyle has definitely been a huge proponent of that. But, it's been interesting to see. The constant question about Florida was always like, okay, when are they going to incorporate some of their other pieces? And, Stage 4 was kind of like a turkey shoot for this team. We got to see them flexing multiple people in. I know we got to see DPI this past week. Orion got to see some stage time. I know, they got up 3-0 and they decided to bench like half the team, so we saw, Byram come in. And it's just crazy to see. Now, I will say, like, I was a little bittersweet about that, just because, that kind of impacted my fantasy Overwatch League team. But it's so nice to see the Mayhem just look like we have a better understanding of what the bigger picture is, or what the scaling was going to be for this team. So I don't know what sort of movements we're to be seeing from this team, but we at least see that there is definitely something there with the pieces that they have, and it's something that they can build off of going into the 2020 season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could believe the argument with Florida. Although Florida's looked better since 2-2-2, so I kind of put them in the same camp as the Justice. Like I kind of attribute that more to like a role lock type of thing, whereas like the Spark have looked like bad since the role lock, and then just like 180'd in like 1 week. So it would basically be akin to like Dallas coming out this week and like dumpstering all the other teams. Like it would be like that, or like Boston. It would be like Boston showing up and 4-0ing like the Gladiators. Like it would just be something that you wouldn't expect on such a monumental level. It week to week, like that stuff happened in week 1 and week 2 because it was roll lock. Everybody was figuring it out. We didn't quite know where teams really stood. Like our power rankings were historically based on something that was basically impossible at this point. So now that we have at least 3, now we have 4 weeks in the bag. It was almost more surprising. Like when the Justice beat Vancouver, I was like, wow, that's really crazy considering how bad they did earlier. But it wasn't like, but when like the Spark took Gladiators to a map 5, I was just like, where was this team the first 3 weeks? Like, I don't know. Like, I have to give Florida credit. Like, you talked about Florida a lot, so I don't want to retread a lot of that, but I do give them credit. Like, they are definitely making progress, so they don't seem like the dumpster fire team going into season 3. It seems like all their moves they've made moving to the Korean roster and stuff like that has worked for them, so they could seriously be the Shanghai Dragons of season 3. They could pull themselves out of that worst league record in the history of Overwatch League. So I am happy to see that, because this whole season long, like we've said it multiple times, but the higher the bottom of the league is, the better the league is. So you hate to watch those, like last year, the Dragons versus Florida game, like, or anybody playing against Florida or the Dragons. It just feels bad to watch that. So I am happy that the bottom is rising. The floor is rising.
Yeah, and another quick note about Hangzhou also is, this is a mostly Korean team that has a Chinese shot caller in Gushwei. That's not something you see every day, like the person that doesn't speak the majority language actually being the shot caller, regardless of if he is the main tank on that team. So definitely out of the ordinary on that front. But we're here to talk about the final week of the season, at least before we hit playoff time. So obviously this week is going to determine a couple of things. So we're looking to secure the final spot for the play-in tournament, and right now there are 2 teams that are looking to secure that spot, and it all boils down to how the Los Angeles Valiant do this week. The 12th slot right now is currently held by the Chengdu Hunters, who have a 13-15 record with a -11 map differential. And a Valiant this week, they have 2 games. They face the LA Gladiators and the San Francisco Shock. All they have to do is secure 1 win, and the Hunters will get dropped down to 13th place, with the Valiant moving up to the play-in tournament. So go figure, like, you can't really write the script any better. We have the Valiant looking to reach playoffs by facing the other 2 local teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and this I really appreciate. Actually, this and the top 6 are very clear cut going into last week. Like, if you remember last year going into playoffs, like the last week of play-in, going into the stage 4 finals was such like a crapshoot. Like, it was like Dallas could make it in if London won a map, and there was all these weird stipulations, like so and so had to lose more than 1 map and stuff like that. Whereas very clear cut, if LA Valiant wins one of the 2 games, doesn't matter how, they're in, and Chengdu's out. If they lose both, Chengdu is in. So it's awesome to see, and it kind of stinks for Chengdu because it's out of their hands. Like, they don't play this week, so that part kind of stinks. But at least it's in the situation where the team that wants to get in is the one that's playing. Like, it would be a much different situation if like Chengdu was playing, and if they lost, then the Valiant got in. So it's still not bad, but I do like how clear cut this is. And the rest of the teams are locked in. Like, it it's one spot for top 6, and if you don't make that, then you're going to the play-in, and then there's one spot for the play-in, at the bottom, and so awesome. So we're gonna get a bunch of games that don't matter, so teams can do whatever they want, and so it'll be just a fun Kit Kat rivalry weekend for most of these teams. And then, for a couple of them, it'll be kind of serious.
Yeah, this week is primarily going to revolve around not just those specifically, but also the seeding for this case. So right now, when you're looking at the top 6, you have the Titans who have secured that top seed. NYXL won their division, so they have the 2nd seed. And then the Shock are the only other team in the top 6 having their seed secured. They have the 3rd seed in this case. So you're looking at the Spark and the Gladiators looking to lock in the top 6 finishes. And that's going to be dependent on how Atlanta does at this point. So you basically have Atlanta and London who are looking to close out the top 6. But no matter what, they're still going to be guaranteed a spot in the play-in. So you have teams like the Dynasty, Fusion, Charge, and Dragons definitely finishing in the top 12, as well as, whoever drops out between the Spitfire and the Reign. But, if you're the Valiant right now, I don't know if you just want to put all of your stock in, one specific matchup. I feel like the Gladiators are probably your best bet just due to the fact that they have been the shakier of the two teams, and the Shock have kind of, dictated their own meta within a meta, very similar to how they dealt with, the triple DPS competitions, introducing the Baptiste, and we've even seen Rascal, flexing over to other roles, Shock have been more experimental with who they're fielding, and I guess to an extent, Gladiators kind of started that with Hydration, but they've been kind of shying away from that at this point. But it's not an easy week to prepare for, even if you just know that you need to walk away with one win. But let's take a look at the matches. So because this is one of the homestand weekends, we are only playing 8 games this week, so we got 4 on Saturday and then 4 on Sunday. So looking at Saturday, we have the Atlanta Reign going up against the Dallas Fuel. Good chance, Reign will secure their top 6, based on how the Fuel have been doing here as of late. We have Boston going up against New York, and, if it was any other stage, I'd be like, yeah, New York has this in the bag, but, New York looks bad, but, do they look Boston bad?
No, they don't look that. Come on, man. Boston is the bottom of the league. I honestly think the Fuel could beat Boston right now. That you're being a little too soft on Boston and a little too hard on New York. I am with you. I think New York looks bad, and I definitely see them having problems going into playoffs with how they're currently looking. But yeah, they're you have to hope that they're going to beat Boston. I mean, Boston is bad.
Yeah, if you're New York, if this isn't a 4-0, I'd be pretty disappointed.
Honestly, if somehow New York loses this, I am immediately picking them to lose at any point in any part of this playoffs. I will not put them any further than the first round in the any type of bracket.
Yeah, and it's weird too because we've seen Boston running Blasé on the off tank. There's been a lot of experimentation with their lineup, and none of it has really worked as of yet. But New York's definitely had their fair share of inconsistencies in this meta, and they're still trying to figure out what actually is our play style, and they've just kind of been stumbling through as they try to figure themselves out. But New York should take it. I can't really imagine Boston coming in and securing a win, but with the way that this stage has played out, with how many upsets we have seen, I'm not going to be completely floored if it happens. I don't want to see that much of a polarizing upset happen this close to the playoffs. Now, that being said, it's going to kind of be like a soft blow into what should be one of the matches of the week when we have the Shock going up against the Titans. Shock are currently ranked 3rd. Titans secured the top seed. So this is going to be a very good match. I do not know what to expect because you have the Shock, who have been fielding all of their pieces I legit do not know what compositions we are going to see or who's going to be on the starting roster because they have been making a lot of switches. And if you're the Titans, the Shock are one of those teams who, going in, are going to be the most feared team into the playoffs. They're the ones that can give you the most looks. They're the ones that kind of adapted to their own ways of handling with the meta. And the Shock are a very hard team to prepare for at this point. So I don't know what the Titans situation is going to be leading into this match, but I'm definitely favoring the Shock in this one. But
For sure.
Every time these two teams face off, it is a war. So
Yeah.
we'll see who how much of the counter pick game is going to come into play in this one. I have a feeling this one's still going to be pretty close, but I feel like the Shock are going to edge him out just due to their flexibility.
My worry for this game is nothing really matters for this game. So I feel like both teams are going to hold a lot of their strategies close to their... they're going to keep the cards close to their chest. So we're going to see a lot of what we saw not championship, but playoff-bound teams do last year in the last week is they're going to run strictly the meta. They're going to run Orisa, May, Reaper on pretty much every point, unless, and this is the one point with the Titans that it could get me, and the Shock are the same way too, unless their egos get to them, then we might start to see some swaps. But if your coaching has any control over this, you're not going to play anything super crazy. Like we're not going to see Hacksaw on the Genji for the most part. Like we may see it on one point, but it's going to be like May Reaper, Orisa Hog, in whatever supports they want to run. And that's my fear for this match is we're going to go in and we're going to say, wow, these are two powerhouse teams, and then we're going to get kind of this lackluster game because neither team wants to show their hand before they go into playoffs, because both of these teams are locked in for playoffs. They're both locked into their spots. So it's, in worst case scenario is we see teams actively not run the meta on purpose. Like that's the other side of the spectrum is you're going to get like dive and stuff that we haven't seen all stage. Or you may even get goats just with 2 DPS. Like you may get Ryan Zarya and stuff that we don't see on a regular basis. And that as crappy as that sounds, and it kind of sounds disrespectful to the fans, if you want to win the playoffs, that's something you have to be prepared to do. So that's my fear going into this. I do hope we get a good match because, like you said, when these two teams play each other, it is always pretty electrifying. But I am worried about just the pretense going in this match and how off the rails boring it can get, because it doesn't matter. Like it's not like one of these teams is vying for a better seed at this point.
So what you're saying is expect to see the Titans field bumper on DPS.
I don't think they'll go that far. Like I should clarify that I don't think they're actively gonna like swap roles around. Outside of what they normally do. Like we might see Rascal on Baptiste and stuff like that for the Shock. But I think they kind of know not to do that because I forget there was another instance where a team did that. And they got in trouble. Like they got like a slap on the wrist. Like, come on, competitive integrity. Like you're not really trying. Like that's almost too far. So, the only instance where I could see maybe that happening, and maybe this could bring some excitement to it, is if they bring Tizzy in and then they put Bumper on another role. Like maybe they'll put him on support or DPS, and then they can kind of justify, be like, oh, this is our secret map strategy, when really it's just them screwing around. So maybe there will be like fun moments like that, but I am worried about this kind of ending up as a lackluster match.
Then on Sunday, we have the Hangzhou Spark going up against the Shanghai Dragons. We have Atlanta versus Boston. We have NYXL versus the Titans. So that could have a couple of parallels there. And then of course we have the Shock versus the Valiant. So it's a really interesting one. So, obviously if the Valiant don't secure the win against the Gladiators, Sunday's game gets that much more interesting because they'd be facing a red-hot Shock team who really have kind of like everything situated at this point. Titans and MXL really doesn't have any meaningful impact on the seed-ins. Atlanta's game kind of does, and so does the Spark Dragons game. But I mean, if you kind of just like look at the trajectories of like the Spark and the Dragons right now, the Spark should be able to pick up this win. We'll see whether or not the Dragons try to address some of the recent issues, or if they're going to kind of stick to their own meta and just keep running the Pharah Widow, Pharah Doomfist, which has not really been working out. It's been frustrating to see them just kind of sticking to the one thing that hasn't really been working, and them not trying to reiterate their plan moving forward. So I want to see a different look from Shanghai, because if we don't, then chances are we're probably not going to see any different looks unless we have some severe changes with the meta going into the play-in tournament, which, again, will have balance updates and the introduction of Sigma. So, I mean, who even knows? We could be seeing a completely different meta going in, or people will just stick to what they have been good at. But, you know, for some teams, that might not be a whole lot. But out of these games right now, obviously, the most value that we see on Sunday is going to be the battle between the Shock and the Valiant. Now, I will say, like, out of all of the Valiant players this stage in particular, I definitely feel like KSF has definitely been the one kind of like pushing them to the forefront. We're still waiting to hear about, you know, the United States World Cup team. They're the last team out of the top 10 to announce their finalized roster. I know that France had just announced theirs yesterday. And, you know, KSF, I know Corey has been doing amazing stuff, but KSF has definitely been making a believer out of me throughout this stage. And, you know, right now I really feel like it's a toss-up, but I feel like Corey probably has more carry potential. But KSF has been the backbone of the Valiant team this stage so far. So the Valiant definitely have that upset potential. But if you're on this coaching staff, how would you kind of like dictate how you're approaching this week, knowing you're facing two playoff caliber teams to just try to make your way into the play-in?
Oh, I'm with you with what you said earlier. I think you focus on the Gladiators because they're more inconsistent. Like they're the team that if you can catch them at the wrong time, you have an easier path to victory. I do think the Valiant have the tools to beat both of these teams. Obviously, the Shock will be a much tougher match. But they look consistently on the same level as the Gladiators. Like Gladiators, I think has a little bit more higher caliber DPS. Like Surefour and Decay, you know, as good as KSF has looked, Surefour and Decay have been crazy this stage. Like they're definitely up there with like Stratus and Corey and stuff like that. Like they just pop off on whatever they're playing. So I would probably put my eggs in the Gladiator basket, but you don't want to neglect the Shock either, just because if you are in that situation, you don't want to go into it completely unprepared. And it's not like a normal week where if you play on a Thursday and a Sunday, you have a few days in there to, you know, adjust and coach and stuff like that. It's literally one day into the next. So you don't want to go in there completely unprepared. That being said, I mean, the Atlanta game holds weight too, because Atlanta has to win both of them. They have, you know, the Valiant have to win one or the other. So Atlanta has to prep for two teams. And I mean, I don't think this is the worst situation for them, because the two teams that they're playing are arguably the two worst looking teams out there right now. But if they do win both of them, Atlanta's in the top 6. Like, you know, seeding will change based on maps and stuff like that. But Atlanta's in, London's out. Like that's what it boils down to. So good for Atlanta. Like there's not too much I can really break down in both their games. Like Atlanta has looked vastly superior to both of these teams. Like there's not much I can really say about that. I will say that going into the Boston game, you don't really know what Boston's going to do. You don't know if they're just going to stick with the Blase, or maybe RCK will come back. You know, it could be like a completely different role swap. Like we could see Blase on Diva and RCK playing DPS, because he's done that in the past. But I don't think Boston's going to try too hard. Like I don't think we're going to see any of that level of like shenanigans. So the last match of the regular season is definitely the one that could have the most weight for sure. And it I think it would be a great. I'm trying to think how I want to word this. Like, I almost hope the Valiant don't beat the Gladiators, because what a moment it would be to close out the season that you started 0-7. Actually 0 and what was it 9, or 0-8. To win the last game of the season to make it into playoffs. Like it's one of those like sports stories, that kind of the uplifting, like the Rudy type stories. Like, yeah, we came back from being utter crap, and we finally worked our way into the last game of the season. Like, it'd just be a fun story to tell. And I am rooting for the Valiant because of all the teams that went 0-7, and I am including Dallas in there just for future predictions. They would be the only one to actually turn it around and make it into the playoffs, which is a huge statistical anomaly. Like, you just do not expect that to happen. So I am rooting for the Valiant, but holy cow, like, as easy as Atlanta has, like, the Valiant definitely drew the short end of the stick on the other side. So it's going to be a fun weekend. Like I said, the a lot of these games don't matter, so we may see some interesting stuff come out. Not really like throwing level, but just some trolly stuff here and there. Some weird comps, stuff like that. So especially from the teams that are in the playoffs that don't want to show their hand. So 2 days of like trolly nonsense with one or two games that really matter, I think is almost like the perfect way to end the season, and until we kick it into high gear the next week and really go into the playoffs and everything's super serious, and we get stuff like that. So it'll be a fun week, and I'm curious to see how the Valiant, because they are the home team, pull out production. Like, this is going to be another out of the Burbank area, so it's going to be fun.
It's crazy to think, like, you have all of the Cali teams there. You have the Shock, the Gladiators, and the Valiant. So I'm really anxious to see, because we saw what the split kind of was with the Dallas homestand between, the Dallas fans and then Houston fans. Like, what the split's going to be like when there's 3 teams that are relative to that area. Like, I don't know if they're going to necessarily be able to drown out both the Shock and the Gladiators fans, or if it's going to be kind of even between the 3. So that's definitely something I'm anxious to see. Hopefully, we won't have any tech issues this week, but, you never know. That stuff can happen. But, by the time we record our next episode, we'll have a very good idea of home venues, schedule, all of that fun stuff, and I can't wait to learn more about that tomorrow, since I know the Overwatch League was teasing that on their Twitter earlier before our recording.
I did just look up the venue, because I haven't really looked a lot into the venue. I'm actually surprised they went with such a small venue. Like, it only seats about 2,400 people. So that seems really small. It seems large compared to like the 500 that Blizzard Arena's, seats, but it seems really small, especially when you compare it to like the Dallas Arena that they filled. And when you factor in that they do have 3 teams, I figured they would have went with something a little bit bigger, because they could have easily sold seats for a bigger arena with all 3 teams. But I guess we'll see. Maybe they're like, are you an LA Valiant fan? Okay, no, you're in this section. I don't know how they'll do seating, probably not like that, but it's going to be fun to see 3 home teams, because like you said, when Dallas had their homestand, we saw Dallas versus Houston, and they both have very vocal fan bases. And, we've been watching these teams basically play at home, Valiant, Gladiators, Shock. Burbank's basically home for them. And their fans are very vocal. So just pushing any number of those fans up could make for a very, very loud experience. I hope they keep the screechers under control. But we'll see. Like, I think this will be a good way to end the season.
Those actually aren't screechers, or pterodactyls.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Could have fooled me. But with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and close out the show for tonight. So if you guys want to help us out, one of the best things to do is to go leave us a review over on iTunes. We also do accept reviews on other podcasting apps, but iTunes is our go-to. Any sort of insight you guys can give us would be greatly appreciated, just because that will let us know how we can make for a better listening experience for you. If you guys would like to find additional Overwatch-related content, be sure to check out Overwatch Recall. There you can find a listen of several Overwatch, Overwatch League, and Path to Pro podcasts over on our website at owlnshow.com/OWRecall. And then every Sunday, or occasionally on Monday, we do the episodic listen for the week of the recall. So to keep up to date on all the latest, you can find it either on our Discord, but also on Twitter at OWRecall. Now, if you would like to support our podcast network, well, you can do a number of different things. We do stream regularly on Twitch, so Twitch Prime subs are always appreciated. That costs you absolutely nothing. Normal subs on Twitch are $4.99 a month. And then, of course, we have our Patreon page, where we have tiers starting at just $1 a month, so you can join the likes of our master and above patrons, Blazing Bob, Brendan, Josabal, Owl, and Kesha in helping our network grow. If you'd like to find more info, be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/OWL Network. Now, Spider, we do have a number of different ways how our listeners can get a hold of us over on social media, and also all over the internet, so why don't you go ahead and let them know how they can do that?
Sure. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at contact@owlnshow.com. You can find us on Twitter at owlnshow. You can check out our website where we post various articles, multiple different things, and of course all our shows, www.owlnshow.com. You can find our YouTube, www.youtube.com/Overwatch League Network. We dropped our Sigma in under 4 minutes video last week, and then next week, a little over a week, we will drop our Sigma deep dive video where I go into a little more of the ins and outs of playing Sigma in comp and stuff like that. So a little more in depth than just saying this is how to throw a rock and stuff like that. So definitely check out our YouTube channel and hit subscribe so you can get notified for all that stuff. If you'd like to talk to us directly, you can do so on Discord, discord.me/OWLN show. We talk through all the games and various parts throughout the week, so just come chat with us. If you're listening to the audio version, you can watch us live on twitch.tv/OWLN show. As Toto mentioned, we are an affiliate, so you can throw all the Twitch primes our way to help support the show, and you get a cool emoticon. But we do have various shows throughout the week. So we have this show, Overwatch League Network. It airs Mondays at 7 p.m. Pacific time. Tuesdays, we have OWL by the Numbers. That is our fantasy Overwatch show. That is 6 p.m. Pacific. Wednesdays is Variety Overwatch Night, basically arcade mode, with Totem and Edinar on Heroes Never Die. That is 5 p.m. Pacific. And then we have host streams throughout the week, so be sure to hit the follow button so you know when we're going live. I typically stream Thursdays. We've been doing comp. We got to see Totem play Symmetra last week and tear it up because we've already cracked the beta.
Yeah. Guys, FYI, if you're just running up against, Rind, Sigma, or, Sigma Zarya, just run
Sigma Orisa.
Yeah, Orisa.
Run Symmetra, because Symmetra is stupid. You just... I was playing Brig, and he was playing Symmetra, and he would just press W and they would disappear.
Yeah, I literally did not use any of her abilities outside of left click.
I played Symmetra the previous games, and we did fairly well. I think we lost a couple because we ran into a couple of Smurfs. But, I was at least putting, the teleporter out of spawn and stuff. Totem wasn't even doing that. He was just whatever. I'm just holding left click. He was playing... Yeah, he was flanking on Symmetra, so play Symmetra. And, we'll be playing this week, too. So, you can come check all that out. On twitch.tv/OWLN show. We got a little distracted. And then finally, you can find our Patreon, patreon.com/OWL network. One more time, multiple tiers. So you can find me on Twitter at SpiderGD. I'm posting random stuff throughout the week. Totem, where can they find you?
Well, I'm also on Twitter at TumblyDrunkCTR. But with that being said, guys, that will do it for us tonight here on Overwatch League Network. This has been episode number 93. I've been your host, Totally Drunk, joined, as always, by my co-host, Spider, and we hope to see you guys back tomorrow night for our next episode of OWL by the Numbers, which might be another two-man show, depending on what Bob's plans are, but we'll see you then. Have a good night, guys. Take care.